Good evening, everyone. I am privileged to introduce to you all today Dr. Russ Buzalko. Dr. Buzalko began his career by enlisting in the United States Air Force at age 17. He worked his way up through the ranks, eventually retiring 20 years later at the rank of major. His time in the Air Force included 9 enlisted years while working in a computer communications career, which included 4 years as a communications duty officer in the White House Situation Room. His military time was rounded out with 11 years flying reconnaissance aircraft as a navigator and deploying multiple times around the world. After his time in the Air Force, Dr. Buzalko spent time as a director of quality assurance with multiple local organizations, ranging from an electronics firm in Elkhorn, Nebraska, to a defense contractor at Offutt Air Force Base. His education includes a Bachelor of Science in Information System Management, Master of Aeronautical Science degree, and a PhD in education. His teachings in higher education include time in the Air Force, Nebraska Wesleyan University, Clarkson College, UNMC, and Children's Hospital and Medical Center. He is currently the director of the Office of Education at Children's and enjoys working with Clarkson College to place our students from various health professions into pediatric clinical rotations. The Children's Office of Education currently holds affiliation agreements with approximately 85 schools or programs across the nation, and in 2019 saw over 2,700 unique learners. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Russ Buzalko.
Thank you, Shane. All right, thank you. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, I probably have a loud enough voice where people can hear me. Thank you very much for having me today. I understand we have 3 groups. They're primarily in attendance today. Omicron Epsilon Chapter of Sigma Nursing, Nebraska League of Nursing, National Society of Leadership and Success. I have to admit, I had to go out and look at the websites and get more information. I want to know my audience a little bit better. And I was very impressed with what I saw, both on the websites and on the Facebook postings. But I had to call out one thing, and to kick off our time together today, is that the Sigma mission outright stated that your mission is developing nurse leaders anywhere to improve healthcare everywhere. I think that's a great statement and a great way to kick off our time together today. It's simple, but yet it's all inclusive. There's also a very good diversity statement on that page. I love what you guys are doing. I'm happy to be here today, and thank you to all of you. So here are our learning objectives for today. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna start out with some traits of leadership, some things I've seen over the years, and we're gonna compare it to different industries. So I'm not trying to say that any other industry is better than healthcare. I'm not trying to say that healthcare is better than any other industry. What I'm trying to say here, and you'll see as we go through the presentation, is that I'm a big proponent for not reinventing the wheel. As long as you give credit where credit is due, we don't plagiarize. In those cases, learn from somebody else, adapt it to what you're doing, and take it from there. So the second objective and the third objective are tied together with TeamSTEPPS. We're going to do a quick overview of TeamSTEPPS, and we're going to look at the essentials block, and then also we're going to dive into the master trainer leading teams block a little bit more and show you the tools that are available to you. So we're going to talk about traits, my personal experience in some cases. We're going to get into the toolboxes of TeamSTEPPS. And then at the end, we're also going to look at analyzing a local hospital, which in this case happens to be Children's, and our response to COVID, what we did as a hospital with a major concentration on the educational side. Meanwhile, the entire presentation today is set for interprofessional, multiple teams, teams within teams. And again, our office works with almost every health profession that's out there that is seen or is employed by children's hospitals. So keep that in mind. I will make this very nursing centric where I can, but then also give examples from other industries too. So how are we going to do this? We're going to break this whole session up into 30-minute blocks. The first will be the traits and comparisons to other industries. Then we're going to get into TeamSTEPPS. It's going to be very fast and furious. I can tell you that there are many, many slides in there, and it's not the way I would normally teach a block. There's no way. Please believe me when I say that. But I want you to be exposed to all the tips and tricks and toolbox issues, resources that are out there and available to you. And TeamSTEPPS is free. It's online. It was developed by the government. So in that case, you can pull down the slides. You can pull down the instructor slides. And they also have notes, instructor manuals, things like that. So I just want you to see it. We're going to go through it very fast. Hopefully I don't make anybody ill with how fast I go through it. But then the next 30 minutes will be the case study, as I mentioned earlier, and we're going to break that down into our immediate initial response, the enduring response, which is kind of the state we're in now, and kind of some future topics and where we're going, or at least where we think we're going with COVID and 2021 coming up. So, quick disclaimer. In no way today am I going to claim to be a god of leadership or to be perfect at anything. Please don't think I'm going down that road at all. I'm just here to help share some experiences that I've had, learn from the things that have worked for me, and I'll admit when I've made mistakes and learn from those too. Sometimes our mistakes are the bigger things we learn from. So, continuing on, let's see. And I want to learn from you. I already did by looking at your websites and seeing what was out there, learning more about my audience, learning more about my teammates here in the room, and also out in the Zoom capacity. All right. So leadership. If you're on the Zoom portion of this session, if you want to get on chat, Nancy McMahon is back there. She's monitoring the chat function. And I'm going to be asking some questions, especially right here in the beginning. And I kind of want some inputs. So leadership. What is leadership? And while you're thinking about that, I'm going to tell you that aircraft right there is the one I used to fly. You used to have up to 35 people on board at any given time, and it's coming in for refueling right now. So there's a lot of leadership, a lot of teamwork going on there, a lot of interdisciplinary, multiple teams happening, and leadership transferred, depending on how close you were to the aircraft, where you were, what the conditions were. So you're going to hear me say a lot of times today, leadership is very situational dependent. Okay? So in this case, leadership would pass around to different people in different crew positions on the receiver aircraft and also on the refueling aircraft. So we have experience with that. This is one of the coolest things I've ever done in my life is refueling from another aircraft. You get two big airliners about 30 feet apart from each other. Super cool. So anyway, back to my original question. What is leadership? Can somebody give me some terms or a phrase of what you're thinking? Either somebody in the room or somebody on Zoom. Nancy, it looks like you got something.
I had someone in the chat say that leadership has a team mentality, that pushing others forward and up with you, not stepping on them to get yourself up.
Great. Who said that? Can we give credit?
Laura.
Good answer, Laura. Thank you for that. I really like how you said that. The team concepts. For me, going back to my roots, this is almost exactly word for word the definition that was used by the Air Force. Really, this is one of those cases where there's no right answer, no wrong answer. You're promoting teamwork, influencing, doing things like that. But I like this definition because one, it goes back to my roots, and also the idea that it hasn't really changed too much over the years. When I was in the Air Force, it was the art and science of influencing others to meet the mission. So almost the same words that are there. But looking at this definition, what are you seeing as some of the key concepts here? What pops out to you? Either somebody in the room or on chat. Can you speak up? Influencing. So why does that pop out to you? Okay, because what you do influences others, you want to have a positive impact, influence them in that type of way. That's good. How about anybody else? Do we have any other chat inputs? How about art? Do you think that's a word that pops out to you? Art and science? Has anybody keyed in on that?
So there was a comment in the chat about leadership directing people, which can be a really complex process.
Very much so.
Yeah,
Good,
so there's lots
response.
of pieces and parts to that, and having everybody be heard and working together to have a goal to complete something.
Okay.
You need to have a strong leadership to be able to get that done.
Yep, working towards a goal, very much like trying to accomplish the mission, kind of a synonym there. That's good. I like it. So anybody else? Any other key phrases? I like the idea that calls out art and science. So that tells me that there's certain parts of leadership that I can teach. There's certain other parts that are going to be inherent and people are just going to naturally have or not have, but they can work towards it. Maybe you're not born with it, but you can still work towards it. And I would say too, is that leadership is something that if you don't do it for a while, it kind of grows stale a little bit. You kind of lose that muscle memory a little bit if you're not in a leadership position. But we're often in leadership positions more than we know. If anybody's involved with a significant other or kids, then you know about leadership and also followership too. All right, so we've got a video coming up here next. This is kind of a little bit more for fun, but we're going to see if we can get this to play. And here's an example of leadership. Thank you, Nancy.
You could open an account on FedEx.com, save 10% on online express shipping.
Okay, how about this? We open an account on FedEx.com, we save 10% on online express shipping.
That is wonderful. You just said the same thing I said, only you did this.
No, I did this.
Makes all the difference.
Bingo.
That's good.
Right on the nose.
All right, if you want to cancel there, Nancy?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Delaney's office. Oh, hello, Mr. Delaney.
Good. Thank you. Yep, perfect. Thank you so much. And if you'll switch back to the slides, we'll be all set and we'll stay on slides the rest of the day. Thank you so much. All right, so that was a bad example. How many of you have been in a meeting like that? Okay, everybody in the room here has acknowledged that they've been in something like that. So that was a bad example. Somebody has a little bit more charisma, somebody actually has a designated position, and people are basically sucking up in that case. The gentleman on the side of the table basically had the exact same answer, but because the other person was maybe in a designated position, or maybe he had the charisma that the other people liked, or maybe it was that little hand gesture, but I'm kind of doubting it was that. So anyway, think about that. FedEx has some cool commercials, I think from the 90s, they used to crack me up. So anyway, just thought I'd throw that in there for today as a little bit of fun. All right, traits of a leader. If we can have a couple inputs, and I promise this is about the last of the group activities for this morning, or this afternoon. Wow, time warp there. How about some characteristics of a leader? Do you want to just shout some out and get some on the chat?
So from the chat, we have some people saying that a leader has the skill and talent to help mold others, but in a positive way.
Okay.
And like art, leadership can be different for every person. So not one thing will work with everybody. Sometimes it has to be listening to not only your boss, but also all the support people that you're working with to figure out which is going to be the best avenue to take, so that everybody's needs are met and that everybody's voice is heard. Mentoring was also mentioned on the chat.
Great. Did I hear vision? Vision was an input from the room. All right. Adaptable. All right. Anything else? Right.
Gives credit to everyone, not just the person who was the leader.
Yep. Good one.
Promoting self-confidence, determination, integrity, sociability, intelligence, and emotional intelligence. So including all of those into that role.
I love those answers. My work here is done. I can go home now. So thank you. Great answers. Great involvement. So these are just some of the answers that I came up with. And talking about confidence, integrity. Integrity is something that I had a commander once say, if you lose your integrity, it's something that's almost impossible to get back. As a leader, you do not want to lose your integrity. You don't want to lie, you don't want to cheat, you don't want to steal, things like that. Confidence, knowledge, kind of hit on one of the answers from the folks on Zoom, is you need to know your team, you need to know your environment, you need to know your organization. You have to have expertise in your field if you're going to be a leader. Part of this is knowing your team. So one thing right now with the way things have been changing with COVID is I like being next to people and seeing them and getting the visuals, the cues coming back, the feedback coming back to me. When our teams all went remote work, I lost that with my team. So knowing your team, knowing when they're stressed, knowing when they're happy, knowing when they're productive, knowing when they're not. I think that's a key trait of a leader. And over time, we're starting to learn with my team, what's going on. I can tell by their emails now a little bit better from some of the things I used to get visually from them. Skilled communicator, people skills, these are just random terms that I put up there. In a lot of cases, your answers were better than mine. So how about a follower? Let's see. Save a little bit of time. I usually ask what are some traits of a good follower, because if you talk about leadership, it's often accompanied with followership. Again, somebody online basically kind of alluded to that topic. Thank you so much for that. But I'm a strong proponent for saying that with a follower, they often have the exact same traits, but they use them in different ways. They apply them in different ways. Then finally, one of the things I have to tell you is if you're going to be a leader or follower, always be authentic. So what I mean by that is, great, if you want to be confident, don't come in one day where maybe you're a meek, mild person. Maybe that's just your nature. That's fine. People like that in the world. There's nothing wrong with that. But don't come in the next day like Rambo with bandoliers of ammunition and kicking open the door. People are going to see through that. The example I can give here is we saw a change of command in one of my squadrons before I left the Air Force. One commander was very much of a people person. He knew everybody in the squadron. He'd come in, first 30 minutes of his day, he would sit down with people, talk with them. He knew everybody by name. He knew their spouses. He knew when they would have their kids' soccer practice. Come in the next day and ask them about it. We changed command. The next commander had a totally different style. And what happened there is he would only communicate with 3 of us in the squadron. Myself, as being the person in charge of the support functions, the operations officer who was in charge of flying, and also our first sergeant who was in charge of the enlisted folks. Okay? It's a valid leadership style, but the people didn't respond to it. They liked the people person prior to him. So he pulled me aside one day as the executive officer said, hey, Russ, what am I doing wrong? What's going on? What did John do different? I explained to him what I just told you. Well, the next day he comes in, he tried to reverse his leadership style. People saw through that. It did not work. And I can tell you, I had 2 officers come running down to my office, and they called me Buzz when I was in the Air Force. And I'm like, Buzz, 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 Buzz. What's he doing? Why is he talking to us? I had 2 people do the exact same thing. So that was my fault. I should have not tried to help mold him in a different direction, or maybe told him not to take it all at once. So anyway, that's my key point there with being authentic. All right, the next slide basically is to show you that I know how to use shapes and smart art on PowerPoint. And what this is, if you look at the Venn diagram that's up there, you pretty much have heard about designated leaders and also contingent leaders. That's pretty common. That's in a lot of your textbooks. I'm not going to cover a lot of definitions today. I'm trying to stay more with lived experiences if I can. One of the ones that doesn't get spoken about too much is the informal leader. You're going to see that a lot with student groups. Doesn't matter to me which profession. I can use the nursing example because when the nurses come over to us as students, we often see them in groups of 8 or 9. It's fun. Sit back once in a while. Try to pick out who the informal leader of the group is. They may not be designated, but you can pick up on it pretty quickly. So then if I'm the instructor, or maybe somebody even in my position at Children's, if I want to try and influence a group, there's a good chance I'm going to go to the informal leader to enlist some help there. So watch for that. Informal leaders happen all the time whenever you have a group situation. The 2 that sometimes get confused and they're used interchangeably, mentor and coach. I consider these to be leadership positions. That's why I put them up there. Mentors, though, normally are somebody within the same skill set, the same profession. And I had a mentor when I left here from Clarkson. I went over to UNMC. I might have been a little bit older. I wasn't that 17-year-old anymore. But I was a baby PhD at that point. I was still fairly new to the career. And I was still trying to figure out my way. So I had a mentor. She was a PhD in education. We'd meet about once a week. She'd help teach me the ropes, help craft my CV, help get me in with people, help me to network. That's a mentor. Coach, the way I usually see it mentioned is that with a coach, it can be anybody. I could coach somebody in nursing. I could coach a physician. And sometimes it's going to be in the professional skills and things like that. I can't necessarily tell somebody how to do a chest tube or how to intubate somebody. But sometimes people just want to coach somebody as a sounding board and somebody to run ideas by. If you continue over to the right, the little things that look like ribbons, one thing in the Air Force that we used to do a lot of is we discussed that situational dependency on leadership, and how that worked was if things were very much the engine's on fire, you got a patient coding. People should know their job well enough to get through those first few steps. And the leader should be able to lead the group through an emergency being very directive because you don't have time to solicit. Now, on the other hand, the other end of the spectrum, you're often going to find that when things aren't as emergent, then you can collaborate a lot more. You're not going to hear anybody ask for more teamwork than me, but there are also times I'm going to admit that you just need to take charge and just dictate the situation in those very dire situations. And then hopefully you can get time in for a debrief and kind of regroup and learn from what happened. Is everybody good with that? Kind of understand what I'm saying? It's a spectrum, and your leadership situations are going to fall on that spectrum somewhere. Continuing down, the thing that looks like a funnel, or if it's a bad day, it could be a toilet bowl. This is more from what we're seeing since COVID. I kind of came up with this one, that our teams, we went from face to face, and I told you I'm a very visual person. If I could have my way, I'd have my team back with me. My academic coordinators, my continuing ed coordinators, our nurse instructors that we have on board with us. But it's not going to happen. We don't always get what we want. So Russ doesn't get his team. So dealing with the current situation of the world, we went remote. So again, I told you, having to adapt a little bit. That's one of the key characteristics of a leader, is knowing how to adapt. So we got to the situation. I can tell you now, certain team members of mine, not to say any names, but some, when they get quiet and I don't get the emails from them, I know they're stressed, they're overwhelmed. I can tell you there's another one or two, if I don't get the emails from them, that there may be a little bit of shenanigans going on. So then I need to check on them. Either way, I need to check on my team when I don't get emails because I'm not getting the full picture, but also I need to see what's going on. Either I need to support the ones who need help, or I need to stop shenanigans, because it's easy to get distracted nowadays. And then also we have the hybrid model, and that's basically where my team is kind of getting to right now, is that we spend so many days in the office. The ones who have to come in will come in and make badges for students. Otherwise, they're working from home and coordinating as if they were in the office. So again, that's the funnel. And then to foot stomp and stress this, leaders must be flexible. So any questions on that? What we're going to try and do is get through the first two blocks here. I should have mentioned this at the beginning. Each is going to be about 30 minutes, and then we'll evaluate at that point. At the end of each block, we'll have a question period. And then at the hour, pretty much, give or take a little bit, we'll see if anybody needs a bathroom break or anything like that. So, all right. Continuing on for now. So, these are some phrases that I like. You may or may not like them. And I'm just kind of step through them very quickly, but it's things I've seen over the years. And hopefully maybe you'll see something that works for you. If you've been a leader for a long time, no matter what your career or profession is, maybe you'll see something like, oh, I remember that. Maybe I should use that with my students, or maybe I should use that in a given situation. I haven't used that in a while. So anyway, kind of a refresher, or maybe something new for you. I don't know which. So the first two kind of go hand in hand together. Take care of your folks and they'll take care of you. Being in the military, that was something that was very evident. If you took care of your people, you gain loyalty. It's the same thing in a hospital setting. I've seen it happen, where people in charge of teams, if they take care of their team, it's reciprocal. It often comes around and goes around. So I also say don't ask your team to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do. So very super simplistic version of this, if you're talking about taking out the trash, if possible, I'll probably take out the trash twice if I have to ask my team to take it out once. But again, that's kind of that loyalty, that honesty, showing them that you're with them. You're not above them. You're not a dictator. So those are the two that kind of go hand in hand. The third one kind of contradicts it a little bit. Look, animation, no extra charge for that, folks. And no extra charge for the corny jokes either, okay? If you don't take care of yourself, then you can't take care of others. So that's the first rule of first responders. So if you're dealing with EMS or anybody like that, they may say something like this. Now, I know it sounds contradictory to the first two statements that I gave you, but what I'm trying to say there is, if you're so stressed, if you can't handle the job, if you can't take care of your team and lead your team, you're of no use to them. From the EMS perspective, and also when I was a fire police officer years ago with a volunteer fire department, we always said, if you rush to the emergency and get yourself in an accident, you just become the next patient. Now you just made the situation worse. So it's very much the same in a leadership situation. You need to take care of yourself. Look for that work-life balance. Don't overextend yourself, but also take care of your folks too. So just kind of balance that out. if you can. Management by walking around. This is about a 60s-ish term. Some people say it's cliche, some say it's outdated. I like it. Again, it works for me because of being a very visual person and wanting to see the people I'm working with. I like to get out and check on our students and see how they're doing. So I often leave my office in the HDR towers over at Children's. I'll go over to the hospital, to the Weeby Tower, or to one of our ICU units. And I like checking in on them. Yesterday I checked in, I happened to run into some Clarkson nursing students. That's great. I want them to know that they have two support systems. They have the school, they have Clarkson College when they're over with us, but then they also have our office. We're there to support them too and make sure that they get a good experience. That's for any of our students. So if you're any students out there online, if you see me coming around, a big crazy old man asking you how things are going, that's just me. I want to know an honest answer, good or bad, all right? Because I seem to shock the nursing students a little bit more than the others because they often assume I'm there to see the nurse or the physician, and I'm really not. I want to see the students no matter what profession they are. So just let me know what's going on if you see me. Lead by example, pretty much self-explanatory. Learn from others. So one of the things I throw out as an example there is if we're talking about other industries, I watched one day, I went to Burger King. You watch this one customer who was just starting to ramp up and about to go off. I watched the manager step up. I'm like, oh, this is going to get good. You know, sorry, I'm just like trying to watch the train wreck that happened, or what I thought was going to happen. I was wrong. The way this evolved, the manager, who I didn't know if she would be able to handle this very well, she was an ace. She nailed it. She de-escalated the situation. She took a leadership role. She basically concentrated on customer service and made sure the customer was taken care of. She rocked it. So I sat there learning something in the middle of a Burger King that day, like how to handle a customer service situation and how to de-escalate a situation from a Burger King manager. Again, not trying to be elitist or anything like that, but I was just not sure how that was gonna go. And you could just see you had a crazed customer on your hand there, so. I'm a big proponent for that. When you're out and about, or even if you're in your academic environment, look around and learn from those around you. Again, pick up on the good things and also learn from the bad things. All right, so true leaders are not afraid to delegate authority. This is probably one of the biggest mistakes I see. People are unsure about themselves in their leadership position. Frequently will not delegate. Delegation is not a sign of weakness. Now, if you push all your work on somebody else, okay, that's another topic there. That's for another presentation. But if you hoard all the tasks to yourself, you're not doing yourself any justice, and also you're not growing your team. Give them a chance to try different things. Give them a chance to grow. And also know as a leader that they might make mistakes. And as long as they're not endangering the patient, not endangering themselves, I don't see a problem with that. So give that a chance. Give it a try if you can. Avoid the term we, or excuse me, no, use the term we, avoid the term I. So this presentation is probably the one where you'll hear me say I the most of any of my presentations because I give a lot of personal examples up front. But if you ever see me at well, where am I? Children's is where I work. Renee, help me out here. Just get the big hook. If you ever see me at Children's in the work environment, I always talk in the we sense because we're a team. Everything we do is we. The only time I may deviate on that a little bit, we is definitely for successes. If there's a failure, then I'm probably going to take it more on myself, and you may hear a little bit more of the I because I want to take ownership for that. Again, it was a team effort, but at the same time too, I have to admit that maybe I lost control of the situation, or maybe that's why something didn't work. So just something to think about. Food for thought, folks. Now I'm doing like the FedEx guy. All right. The final one here, I've seen an example of this one not too long ago. I was a patient family member at the Eye Institute over here at Trulson. And basically one of the access folks came out and I could overhear her. And again, it's me just paying attention to my environment and what's going on. And she sat down, she talked to the other access personnel and said, oh, Dr. So-and-so, she's my favorite. She knows me by name and she said I was doing a great job. Just think about that statement, folks. Something as simple as knowing the name of somebody who supports you. They may not be officially on your team, but they are part of a support function to you. Knowing their name and giving them a little bit of appreciation goes a long way. I can tell you that access person is going to bend over backwards now for that physician. But too often that does not happen. So that's why I put it in here, and I want to make sure I bring it up as a point that when you're working with other teams, acknowledge them. If you're a nurse working with RT, acknowledge them. Thank them for their help. Phlebotomy and nursing, the physician should be doing it. Everybody should be doing it if they give you a hand. I try to do it with our IT folks because I know they take a beating all the time. They get blamed for everything that goes wrong over in our organization, and I know that's across the board with every organization. So giving them a thank you and saying that they're doing a good job is a nice thing. All right, so quick comparison to other industries and kind of where I came from. I came from the crew resource management side, and I wanted to see how it transitioned over to healthcare. So that was my dissertation topic, and how I ended up here eventually is how I got my foot in the door with healthcare education, and I ended up staying here. So, quick history lesson. 1970s, the airlines, they were crashing perfectly good aircraft. They crashed one in the Everglades because a little peanut bulb, those little 2-cent light bulbs in the dash panel of the console of a cockpit was burned out. 3 people concentrated on it. Task saturation on one insignificant task crashed the entire airplane into the Everglades because nobody was backing anybody up. There was a few other incidents. But with an airplane crash, guess what? It hits the news immediately. It's high profile. I can tell you, jumping ahead a little bit, a couple of years ago, I was at a TeamSTEPPS conference in Washington, D.C. And here's the kicker. 2 aircraft came within a few hundred feet of each other at Chicago O'Hare. It was all over the news. People were losing their mind. Nobody was hurt. It is a big deal. I mean, I fully admit that. But it made national news. In healthcare, because of human errors, we crash the equivalent of 2 airliners a day. And that's from the Institute of Medicine to Air is Human. And that's very outdated information at this point. So the numbers could be much higher. So why aren't we doing more? That's partly why I'm here, is to help you with this, with leadership, communications, teamwork, the interprofessional part of what's going on in healthcare to see if maybe we can alleviate some of those issues. So continuing on with the example, aviation and NASA and DOD got together and said, hey, we're crashing perfectly good airplanes. Not a lot of them, but enough to really make a significant impact. So we're gonna have a summit, we're gonna meet up, and we're gonna figure out how to fix this. They did, they came up with new processes. It was called crew resource management. It was adopted, and it was spread across aviation as a whole. But the key word up here in red is that it was mandated. That's a huge difference I see between aviation and healthcare. So crew resource management went out there from about 1979, 1980, went to railways. UP uses it, railway resource management, so RRM. Went to anesthesia, nuclear medicine, the merchant marines use it, and merchant navy, things like that. It went across the board. It was actually a big hit. Crew resource management for aviation is in about its 5th or 6th generation. It's been upgraded. It went from the cockpit to everybody on the airplane, like the flight attendants. Went to the ground personnel who maintain the aircraft, and also the air traffic controllers. They're all getting trained on this now. When I used to get my check rides, the annual certifications to fly, I would get graded on crew resource management. When I taught a student, I graded him or her on crew resource management. It was a requirement. So continue forward, get up to about 2003, and skipping through Disney and Nissan, there are other great examples to watch. There are other industries to watch as far as good examples of leadership and how to take care of customers. So in that case, substitute the word customer for patient. And a lot of the skills and a lot of the traits are going to be transposable. All right? So 2003, TeamSTEPPS was based on crew resource management. Some people will argue with me on that and say, no, it's not, no, it's not, no, it's not. Well, yes, it is. It's the same concepts. I've been on both sides of the fence. It's just TeamSTEPPS is now developed, and it has an evidence base in healthcare, because that was one of the biggest knocks against crew resource management, is it didn't have its base, its evidence base in healthcare. So I get it. I understand why people would be a little reluctant. But the governing bodies only suggest that TeamSTEPPS or team concepts should be used. That's the big difference I see between healthcare and aviation. One, it's an absolute requirement. The other, it's a highly suggested. And guess what? People don't always do what's suggested, even if they know it's right. All right, I'm getting some head nods from the room on that one. All right, so again, we talked about monitoring your situations, and that's often when I talk about the Burger King example. Don't reinvent the wheel, give credit where credit's due. Look to other high risk, high reliability organizations, kind of like I mentioned already. And I can't stress enough that leadership is highly situational dependent. That's kind of bringing us to the end, almost, of this first session. So at Children's, we have a great organizational development group, and they develop leadership training all the time. So to kind of skip through this pretty quickly, they offer courses that you can go to at different times throughout the year. Emerging Leaders is for anybody you think is going to be a good manager someday, but may not be at this point. That we've sent one of my coordinators there already. Leadership's Essentials, if you become a manager or above, you have to go to that within 60 to 90 days. Leadership Horizons, if you've been a manager for a while. Leadership Academy is if you're a director or above. I went to that last year. It was like every other month over at UNO. And it's great. You need classes like this. Your support functions, your clinical functions, your various professions, again, interprofessional, needs all these types of things, and you can be in the same area together learning from each other. So we also have resources for working remotely. We have change management, and also for helping people with their evaluation tools. I think our organizational development does a great thing. Mistakes, you're gonna make them, you're human. Don't beat yourself up too much. I use the end of the day when I'm driving home to review my processes, what I did right, what I could do better the next day. That's just a suggestion. It might work for you, it may not. Maybe you want to decompress. But I like reviewing what I did, but I see too many people get wrapped around the axle in what they did wrong. Think about the good things you did too. I'm very much a person who at the end of the day goes, oh my God, I didn't get this, this, and this done, but I don't look at, I got 12 things done right. So again, part of taking care of yourself. All right, questions on the first session as I just scream into my mic. Anything locally? We're just a couple minutes behind, but I'm confident I can catch back up. Nothing online? All right, so we will jump into it. We'll start into the next section. So that was me and my experiences and offering what I thought was something valuable and a couple of my mistakes along the way. The next section, I have to give full credit to TeamSTEPPS. All I did was pull down their slides. The first section you're gonna see is the Essentials course, which is normally taught over a half a day. You're gonna get it probably in about 10 minutes or so, just a high-level overview of what they talk about in the tools. When you see the slides change, that's the Master Trainer course, and it's just the module on leading teams. So I want to show you what's available there, either for the instructors, or even if a student group wants to get together and look at what's available out there. Again, the slides are free. They're there for you to pull down. Just Google TeamSTEPPS 2.0. It'll take you out to the AHRQ website. And if you look down the right side of the screen here, those are the different materials that are out there. Starting with TeamSTEPPS, that's basically your Essentials course. You got the office base, which we recently taught to the outpatient clinic here at Nebraska Med. Long-term care, dental, you can see limited English proficiency, rapid response, simulation. Somebody still there? There we go. Simulation, and also the Master Trainer course. That's usually a 2-day course. We've taught it in a day. I don't care for that too much because it is too fast. Because with this, you get a lot of case scenarios that you critique. You also sit there and you talk to each other and give examples to each other of things that you've seen in your clinical environment. And you're sharing with other team members from other professions too. So it's definitely interprofessional. You got the research evidence that people often want to see, and good on them. I'm with them on that. And then you got webinars down at the bottom there. So that's directly from their website. Now these next few slides, this is the Essentials course. And there's even a little pocket guide where it has all these slides that you're going to see and all the tools you're about to see in rapid succession. But there's a little spiral bound pocket guide, and it's also available online. So I have it on my phone. You can download it for free. I think it's on the App Store. But again, it's out there, and you can look at the different tools, and you can bring them up. You can bring up the checklists. Great tools. All right? So here's TeamSTEPPS, and it talks a little bit about the background, what it is. These slides will be available. Dr. Rukamp will have them. She can make them available to you. This session's being recorded. Again, I'm foot stomping and letting you know that this is the reason why I'm screaming through this next section, is because the tools are going to be there. I just want to expose you to it. That's not the way I always teach. Okay. All right. Thanks. So TeamSTEPPS, I kind of gave you the background, where it came from, what it was based on, and how it was adapted to healthcare. And you can see up here, we're talking about performance, knowledge, and attitudes, and we break down leadership, situation monitoring, mutual support, and communications in the next few slides. There's your key principles. Again, a team structure, interprofessional, multi-team structure. We're talking about communications. We'll give you some tips and tricks there, some things for your toolbox. Leadership, different styles. Again, key to this presentation and to the groups that are here in audience today. Situation monitoring and mutual support, because as a team, you want to support each other. All right. So the team, this is what we're looking at as far as a team. We got the patient at the top, administration at the bottom. You got the core team, which is often your primary team, or contingency teams. When I did my study for my dissertation, I often thought back to the trauma teams. If you have a trauma, you're going to have your primary team. You're going to have multiple other teams that will come in as specialists. Coordinating team, I saw a great example of that when I was in the ED doing my study, and the house supervisors often played this role because they would be standing back. If you've ever been in a chaotic situation, if you're the third person, the third party that's standing back, that's often one of the best positions to be in, because you can see the whole picture and you're not involved in the exact task that's going on. So the house supervisors would often keep an eye on and say, oh, okay, this patient's gonna need imaging. So they'd call up imaging and say, hey, you're gonna have a trauma patient coming. Or they knew that this patient was gonna have to spend the night, and as a trauma patient, the house was full, they'd start calling to say, hey, we're gonna need a bed. So they'd start that behind the scenes coordinating. So again, teams within teams working together for that patient. SBAR, I'm pretty sure any nursing students, any nursing instructors, this is like a very nursing-centric tool. I'm getting a lot of head nods in the room. I knew I would on that one. So I don't have to explain this one to you, but it's one of the tools that's out there. TeamSTEPPS does a good job about embedding videos where the class would critique the video there. You'd talk about it. You'd talk about good examples, bad examples, your own personal examples, things like that. The acting is not great. It's better than anything I could do. But at the same time, too, it's not going to get an Oscar at any point. So just keep that in mind. All right, call out. So this is a great tool. We use this one a lot in aviation, and I love to see it in healthcare. This helps to make sure everybody's on the same sheet of music. Again, you're calling out something. In this case, the example goes, the leader's asking for the status of the airway. The resident is saying the airway is clear. The leader asks for breath sounds. Breath sounds decreased on the right side, which is key. Blood pressure, the nurse responds that the BP is 96/62. So what are we doing there? When we call out information like that, we're making sure anybody within earshot is on the same sheet of music with us. Because now somebody else in the room might pick up on the idea that decreased breath sound on the right side. Well, maybe imaging or RT might key in on that if they're there. Also, your team as a whole, maybe the nurse is doing this, but maybe you have a student nurse who needs to get in on the information, because you don't want to keep that information to yourself, anything to do with a patient. You want to make sure that gets out to the entire team and whoever's around. So that's just one small tool so far. Check back. You may know of this as closing the loop. So in this case, the doctor's calling for 25 milligrams of Benadryl IV push. The nurse says and confirms 25 milligrams Benadryl IV push. Doctor says that's correct. You're closing that loop, you're confirming. We did this with instruments in aviation. Altimeters were a big thing for us. If we got a new altimeter setting, we all set it and we'd all call it out to make sure everybody had the same thing. Very much similar to what you're doing in healthcare here. If we didn't do it, we'd crash into a mountain. Bad. You do it here, patient's gonna have a bad outcome. We don't want that either. That's also bad, you know that. All right, so handoffs. Over at Children's, we use I-shaped. Here, TeamSTEPPS is talking about I pass the baton. Gives you good details. Again, the actual course would give you examples to which you can go through. You'd also develop some of your own examples. I won't go through each of these. All right, so there we go. Effective team. We talked about some of these in the beginning. We had some great examples from online. I gave you some of the examples I thought of as far as being an effective team leader. One thing that is mentioned here that I like picking out is making sure as the leader you manage and allocate resources. Great. But the other thing I've especially learned lately, and I've been watching and monitoring closely, is frequently with a team, you have to assign timing. Because I can tell you with my team a lot of times, I'll tell them I want something done. and maybe we have a miscommunications. Maybe to me, that means I want it done tomorrow, but to Nancy, that means she can reprioritize it and it'll be done in 2 weeks. Well, I should make it clear as the leader from the beginning, like, Nancy, I'd like to have that tomorrow. And then she's going to acknowledge I'm getting a head shake from her right now, so I know she received that message. I got the feedback. We're good. All right. So that's one thing I like to add, and you don't see a lot mentioned in a lot of the different areas. So the next couple slides pertain to this, the team events, the brief, the huddle, and the debrief. So do you use this a lot, or how much? Can anybody tell me what the use a lot? All 3 of them? Mostly debriefing? Okay, that's great. I love to hear that, especially in an academic situation. Those are wonderful. Now to jump back to the beginning again, the huddle is wonderful because it gets the whole team on the same sheet of music as you start the day. That's usually at the beginning of shift. You get together, you do a huddle. It's usually one of the most controlled. You wake the people up who aren't awake. You give them some caffeine, things like that. You get them ready to go for their shift for the day. You talk about the patients, you share information, all those good things. You're going to see a checklist here in a minute. That'll give you some examples of what should be covered in a briefing. Huddle is in the middle of the day. In aviation, we could call a timeout, which was the equivalent to a huddle. But you could say, I need a timeout. Huddle is the same thing. You stop the flow for a few minutes. You talk about something because in most cases, the situation has changed. Something has happened. Situational awareness tells you that you need to go a different route, or you need to make the leader aware of something, or you need to make your team aware of something if you're the leader. So that's the huddle in the middle of the day. One of the biggest things with team concepts is we need to make sure that people know if they're the lowest ranking, least experienced person on the team, that they have a right to speak up, to stop the line. And as the leaders, we need to make sure that they aren't squashed if they say something incorrect or if they stop the process at the wrong time. Use it as a teaching moment, because guaranteed they won't make that mistake again in the future, but they need to know that they can speak up. So, okay. And one of the good things for huddle is SBAR. It's kind of a tool within a tool in that case. So I think we all know physicians, they like information like this. So SBAR is a great way to consolidate that information to include a recommendation on the end. All right. So I recommend a tool within a tool on that one. And then debrief, it was mentioned, Shane said you do a lot of them. Great for teaching, great for regrouping at the end of the day, and also great if you have a traumatic situation during your shift. Horrible situation to have a sentinel event or anything goes bad. Traumas are always bad. At Children's, I can tell you, if we lose somebody, we just lost a pediatric patient. And while any death is horrible, pediatric always seems to hit people harder, and rightfully so. So we often have debriefs that involve our chaplains, social work. There's different groups. We also have a Thrive group that helps with secondary stressors. And that's another entire group that we have that help the clinicians, especially in these very stressful situations. So I'll kind of skip through the next 2 slides because here's your checklist for the brief and what TeamSTEPPS recommends. There's a checklist for the debrief, and that's partly why I mentioned an SBAR as the checklist that you could use for the huddle, because I don't mention it here in these slides. This is a section that I often get to teach when we teach the Master Trainer course, the situation monitoring, because that aircraft you saw on the screen earlier, that whole mission is about situation monitoring. We used to collect information from the battlefield, we'd analyze it, churn it, and get it out to the people that needed it. It's very much like this graphic that you see right here. It's not really much different. If you start in the upper left, situation monitoring, it's an individual skill. So that's me walking around here figuring out what's going on, picking up on cues, collecting information. The next part, as you continue around the circle, is situational awareness. I took that information that I gained from the situation, whether it's being with a patient, whether it's being with my leadership or being with my team. So take that information, I process it. Now I have a better picture of what's going on around me. That's that situation monitoring. Now I share it with you. That's the shared mental model. That's how you end up with an improved team outcome. So again, if I know something, I want to share it with you. You need to know it. If I know it, you need to know it, and vice versa. Okay? So that's why you spend an entire hour in the Master Trainer course just on that concept alone. step. Again, situation monitoring. It's a great little checklist. I could see this on the back of a badge, hang tag. This increases your situation monitoring, status of the patient, team members, environment, progress. I think one thing that gets skipped over a lot of times is the environment. We all want to take care of our patients. I totally get that. Totally agree with you. But sometimes the environment. Do you have the right equipment? What's going on around you? How about your team too? Kind of like I mentioned earlier, take a step back. I used to see this with my navigation students. They would get so concentrating on when are they going to meet that tanker, or when are we going to get to the next point, and they're working their timing. They concentrate on one point so much, they forget all the big things going on around them. So we'd ask them for a cross check. We'd kind of just like slap them on the shoulder, say, hey, how about a cross check? Oh, okay. We'd get them to take a step back. They'd look at their instruments. They'd go, okay, altitude's on, this is on, engines are running. You know, big picture, what's going on? Again, environment. Take a step back, look at your environment. Many of the other points are pretty obvious there. That's why I'm kind of going through those quickly. Cross-monitoring. Key phrase here, bottom line, watching each other's back. So as a team, I'm going to be watching Nancy. We're working together, and I'm going to be watching her. How's she doing? She performing okay? I'm not here to judge. That's the last thing I want to do. But if we're peers, if we're teammates, I want to make sure she's okay. Is she getting swamped with patients? You know? And then the same thing goes with the other teams that are coming in too and helping you out. Helping to avoid mistakes, identifying them quickly. And the I'm safe checklist. This is something before we ever flew, we always ran a checklist similar to this. If you took certain medications, you were not allowed to fly. It was definitely a no-go. So why do we let people come in and take care of patients in high-risk situations if they're on some of these exact same medicines? That confuses me. I don't know why that happens. I kind of get it. I understand why to a certain degree. But if you really want to take out the error and the issues that are going on, you probably shouldn't be working. You know, if you aren't supposed to drive a truck or fly an airplane, sometimes maybe we shouldn't be taking care of patients or doing other high-risk duties at work, okay? But anyway, the I'm safe checklist, it talks about illness, medication, stress, alcohol, drugs, fatigue. The United States, we're horrible for this. You go to work when you're sick and you take a day off when you're healthy. You take a vacation day when you're healthy. We're not doing ourselves any justice there. You know, take a day off when you're healthy and stay home when you're sick. But, you know, it's a cultural thing. Everything we're talking about today is pretty much cultural, and some of it's not going to be that easy to implement. Cultural shifts are not easy. It's like turning the Titanic after it hit the iceberg sometimes. So keep that in mind. Task assistance. This one I frequently see if I'm wandering around the floors, and not to name any hospitals, but I've been to a few hospitals, so I'm not going to say which one. But when I see this one, I often think of, you'll see people sitting at a desk. People on one end of the desk are frantically working. People on the other end of the desk have basically no patience. Why aren't they talking to each other and helping each other out? That's task assistance. It should be sought or requested. If you request it, you're not weak. So some people will think that if I have to ask for help, I'm going to be weak. No, because ultimately you're helping your patient. Patient safety, quality of care is what we're stressing. So now if you can share the workload a little bit, because we've all seen it, certain parts of the floor may have more patients, or some might have higher acuity. Somebody might be dealing with a situation at home, maybe they need a little bit of extra help. So offer that help. You'd be surprised how far that goes, as if you offer somebody, if I offer Renee some help here, she's going to remember that. Again, it goes back to some of my points earlier. You're going to get loyalty. You're going to get payback on that. And I'm not saying that's what you're looking for. But if you help somebody, you're probably going to get that back tenfold. So it goes the same thing for the healthcare team. Or from the interprofessional perspective here, help other people. I've seen where nursing staff have offered to do a blood draw for a phlebotomist who was swamped. Said, oh, I'm doing the IV. Do you want me to just get some blood at that time? Simple requests like that, the phlebotomist was floored and was happy that they could move on to the next patient and didn't have to do the blood draw. Now, I know there's rules and other things that go along with that. You'll know that better than I do if that can be done or not. Situations like that, I'm not trying to say it's always going to be the case. But in that case, it could be, and it worked out great. All right, getting near the end. Feedback. Academic environment generally is pretty good for this. I usually don't have too many problems with getting through to people on that one. And advocacy and assertion, you make sure you're firm and respectful. People are going to advocate for their patients, but also advocate for your team. All right, we good on that? And the 2 challenge rule. This is, again, another cultural shift where people have the right to speak up. And if they speak up and as a leader, they say it twice, that's when you want to kind of stop the action and wonder, why is Renee saying this to me twice? Why is she concerned twice about the same topic? So again, it kind of takes a little bit of training to get this one invoked and get this one out there for people to use. But it's a great thing because sometimes people overlook it. This one is, I get to act like a giant man-child and I tell you to cuss at work. But what it is your organization can come up with key phrases that gets people attention. If people aren't comfortable, they're unsafe, or if they're concerned, uncomfortable, or describe a safety situation. In the aircraft, if all I had to do is say, I'm unsafe, I don't feel this situation is safe, everybody's ears would perk up like dogs with a kibble and bit bag around them. They'd be like, what? What's going on? So anyway, key phrases like that, if you can work that into your organization. If you hear one of your team members say that they're not comfortable with a situation or that they're concerned for a patient, your focus should go over there and figure out what's going on. Make them feel safe. Get rid of that concern. Address the issue. This is set up for conflict resolution. You got a nice little checklist here is available to you. And then each module within TeamSTEPPS ends with the barriers, the tools and strategies, and the outcomes listed for the module that you just completed. So I'll try and go through this fairly quickly. The TeamSTEPPS Master Trainer. The main point I want you to see here is that each of the cases you deal with in the Essentials course, each of the scenarios, you will get a breakdown of how to teach it. So again, if you're a novice instructor, all the tools are here. You have instructor guides, you have breakdowns of the case studies and everything like that. So just hang with me for a few minutes and then we'll take a quick break. So talking about the instructor guides, it even goes to show you how to step through the course. Again, we talked about instructor manuals and customizable materials. So like I said, the Master Trainer course is supposed to be about 2 days. You can do it in a day or you can do it in 5 if you want. But customize it to your organization is what I would say there, and use some real world examples without violating HIPAA. You got some different leadership exercises. They often break them down into individual and then also groups. Talks about the exact definitions that they use for different types of leaders. And also it starts breaking down some of those areas. And again, like I mentioned, it teaches you the questions to ask while you're going through and teaching the course. Characteristics of an effective team leader, and you're also going to define the plan. So in this case, you're making sure as a leader you're giving your team the resources that they need. Again, case studies and a breakdown of the discussions is usually accompanied by that. So there's your discussion and how you would lead your group. And then we go into the tools and areas that we've already discussed in the Essentials course, and also again more examples on how to debrief and more examples on your checklist that you've already seen. So, like I said, it's kind of a repeat of what you saw in the Essentials course, but it teaches you how to teach it, breaks it down, and hopefully nobody had a seizure from all that flashing on the screen. Are we okay? Okay, good. I'm getting head nods that we're okay in the room here. And again, they summarize everything that was going on. How about questions before we go into the last section? And I got us just about right back on time. So thank you for bearing with me on that. If you're okay with it, why don't we take a quick 5-minute stretch break, both online and in the room, and then we'll get into the case study of how we handled COVID over at Children's. Alrighty, so it looks like it's 6:06. We'll kind of start ramping back up again, and I apologize for how quickly that went again, but I just wanted to show you what was out there available to you free of charge. I do know that the national conference now does charge. The conference used to be free, but AHA, American Hospital Association, I think is that an acronym, took it over, and now it's like a $600 fee to go. Yeah, it used to be free, and then to see that happen, I haven't looked it up lately. I just haven't gone the last couple of years. I haven't had the funds to go do that one. But it used to be a very good thing. As with any conference, I like the networking portion as much, if not more, than the actual sessions a lot of times, talking with people. Imagine that, me liking to talk to people. Anyway, so any questions? Anybody think of anything about the first two sections? And like I said, I promise to slow it down a little bit because we're going to get into the examples of what we did at Children's, because that seemed to be one of the topics that people wanted to talk about. I heard we had a Coast Guard person online who was very favorable of knowing that they use some of the same tools that I mentioned here, which apply to Coast Guard, aviation, healthcare. Cool, we ready to get started? All right, thank you. Welcome back. All right, so like I said, I'm the Director of Education over at Children's. Give you a quick little rundown on who we are as far as what our office is, and also I'm gonna start first with the higher level, what the hospital does, in case you aren't too familiar with us. So these are straight from our website. If you're looking at it, we have 9 floors in our current hospital, about 52 outpatient specialties. You can see the number of visits there. From an educational perspective and also from a clinical perspective, people want to come to us. I'm not trying to sound all high and mighty or anything, but we are the regional leader in pediatric medicine, specialties, things like that. So whether it be a student from the local region wanting to get pediatric experience, you know, people tend to want to come to us, which I think is a good thing. It's a wonderful thing. So there are visits. Here's our children's physicians clinics. We got 15 offices right now spread throughout the region, up to Sioux City, out to Kearney, possibly in Des Moines in the future, and Council Bluffs, Plattsmouth, so kind of like within that region. So we do have outpatient clinics all around, concentrating on primary care. The Hubbard Center, which is going to be built, it'll open next fall, is another 9-story facility. So I was telling people on the phone the other day, if you hear us talking, we're going to say the Hubbard Tower, and our current hospital, we're starting to refer to now as the Wiebe Tower, which is what it was named all along, but we just referred to it as the hospital. So now we want to be clear on our communications, and we're trying to get that out there, make sure people know. Wiebe Tower, Hubbard Tower, are 2 hospital towers that are coming online. Cardiac is a big thing for us. We were talking before the presentation today. One thing that I thought was very smart of our clinicians and our leadership at Children's is that the cardiac care unit was due to stand up when the Hubbard Center opened up, but they elected to take half of our 5th floor right now and stand up the cardiac care unit because they figured it would be beneficial to stand it up, work out their processes, get their charge nurses in place, get their physicians used to dealing with the interprofessional teams before the move is made, because you can see that when you actually make a move into a brand new building, everything's going to be all over the place, and then the first days you're going to be just trying to find where the bathroom is. So you don't want to combine that with standing up a new unit at the exact same time. So I thought that was very smart. So they spaced it out. They're up and running already, and they take up about half of our 5th floor right now. It kind of fluctuates a little bit. So that's some more information about Children's. Yes, this is an eye chart, and I meant for it to be like that. But this is a breakdown of the students that we see through our academic offices, through our Office of Education. I have 3 coordinators that handle all these nearly 2,800 learners a year that pass through us. So that's everybody from a shadow student who might be there for 4 hours, maybe on a pre-med rotation, to our nursing students who come over for pediatric rotations. You can see everybody's on here from paramedics, pharmacy, all your rehab programs, MAs, social work. We even started programs for pastoral care, just started up last year. And then of course your med students, residents and fellows. Residents and fellows, pediatric resident is 3 years, med peds is 4, and then they may stay on with us for a fellowship. So some of them we may see for 3, 4, or 5 years, depending what's going on there. So lots of people. All right, next slide, let's go. It's not wanting to go, there we go, okay, cool. So under my office, we not only have those academic portions, we also deal with continuing education, so CNE and CME. So we have 2 neat little factoid slides here. So the first one is for CNE, 255 unique events in 2019. We're accredited through the Midwest Multi-State Division, to which we just got our accreditation again. I'm proud of our group. We didn't get distinction this time, but we moved to a new lead nurse planner who moved over to my group at the beginning of the year and had to go through the whole recertification process. A lot of great help from Judy Timmons, who you may know. Wonderful person, but we transitioned continuing nursing education over to my office in the December-January timeframe, and that rolled straight into accreditation. So I'm very happy that we passed. We may not have gotten distinction this year, but we didn't drop the ball on it either. So, you know, we'll take that as a win. But that's just some information on our CNE at Children's. Here's our CME, 362 active activities. And for this, I can tell you that something that's done at Children's is called language of caring. We teach our staff how to deal with people, deal with each other. You have to go to these classes where you learn how to communicate in a heart-head-heart situation, things like that. So that upped our numbers. We were at like 170 unique events. 2019, we jumped up quite a bit because we were able to offer CME on those. So let's see, as far as my staff, we have 3 academic coordinators. I have a CME senior coordinator. I have a GME, CME and a CNE senior coordinator on both sides, and 2 people to help them out. And then we also have 2 nursing instructors who teach for a couple of the colleges here locally, like Briarcliff, Brian. So anyway, we have 2 nurse instructors. So my team is a total of 9 of us, including me. So one of the things I thought about, and one of the things that I noticed over the recent couple of years is with the number of programs we have going, and I'm not saying any program is better or worse, or I'm not saying any director is better or worse, but I noticed at times that communications didn't seem to happen as smoothly as I hoped for. I'm going, what's going on? You know, I teach communications, I teach teamwork. Why am I not getting through? And I took it on me. I had to evaluate what's going on. If you look at the different directors and the people I work with, and I just use Clarkson College here, you could put any college in there. In a lot of cases, the directors are very deep into their programs. I mean, they deal with the details that I don't have to deal with. But then I have to deal with a very broad, many different programs at a very shallow level. So one thing I discovered, and I've been trying to do a lot more, is find out where that intersection is, because that's where we're going to communicate better. And also I'm going to find out what their motivation is, and the message is going to get through a lot clearer. So that was something I had to wrap my brain around, to which I didn't do very well, probably my first year at Children's, is that my scope is like the width of this room, whereas the program directors I deal with, their scope is like the height of the building. So that's all I'm trying to point out there. It's something that I learned as I went along. You'd think I would have known that by now, but when you get in different situations, different things happen. So jumping ahead to COVID. Looks like we're doing pretty good on time. We all know the last quarter of 2019, COVID started to emerge in China, and it started to spread, started to go around the world, Asia, Europe, hit the United States. So we're all familiar with that. So right around the beginning of January, excuse me, the end of January, the beginning of the year, is when we stood up our incident command. You could see this thing tracking around the globe. It was starting to come to Omaha. If you remember, we brought the people from, I want to say the Pacific Princess, but I'm trying to think what ship it was. But, you know, the people came here in a group. They went out to Camp Ashland. We put some in the biocontainment unit. We put some over at the IXL building, things like that. So we stood up our incident command because it was inevitable that this was going to happen. I think it was good on Children's. They stood up incident command early. They were being proactive. They were getting ready for this. You know, maybe could have been done earlier, maybe later. That's up for debate. But I think they did a wonderful job there. So our incident commands is made up of the incident commander, communications, children's physicians, which is also almost the same as saying, well, not really. I take that back. Finance, you got the med staff and all the med tech, infection prevention, operations, logistics is where I got inserted into, and I'll explain that in a minute. Outpatient, which is basically like our SPC, our specialty clinics, planning, who helps keep the whole group on task and tracks the taskings that are going on across the board, and safety and community, because we know that as this thing developed, we had to take more and more information and report it up the chain and out to the state and out to Douglas County. So that's a big reason why safety and community was on there, because they were continuously taking information about children's and our resources and communicating that out. So we got into this, and Incident Command was stood up. And one of the things I recognize is that with 2,800 unique learners a year, I wasn't getting all the information I needed to pass back out to the schools. So one of the things I didn't cover on that slide was we had that many students, but we also have about 84 different schools and programs we deal with, to which I have affiliation agreements with. So there's deans and directors at each of those that we need to talk with. That's a lot of people. And there's a lot of people asking, is children still open? Can we send our students? Do we have to bring them back? What do we need to do? Where are they going to park? Perfectly valid questions. 100% I agree with them, and I agree that I'm the person that should have got those questions, but I didn't have all the answers. So as we saw in TeamSTEPPS, I was assertive. I advocated to get onto the incident command. I told my boss, I'm like, we really need to get me on there, because even if they change up the parking at Children's, that affects our students. And really it came about the first week I was on there. So anyway, she managed to get me on there. She said, Russ needs to be on there. And it worked out. It was the right thing to do. And again, I just tried to advocate for our schools and for our students so that I would have the information so that everybody could do what they needed to do. All right. Pretty proud of Children's. We were often at the forefront of what was happening. Part of the reason why I got onto Incident Command is because I saw it on the news when they were having Incident Command before I started, that we were like the first one in town to say we're cutting back on the number of visitors. Now think about that. We're in a unique situation. If you're in an adult facility, you can say no visitors. If you're in a long-term care facility, you can say no visitors, and people will chat, you know, FaceTime and do all sorts of stuff like that. If you have a kid in a patient room, you can't really say you're not going to have any visitors with your child. But one of the key things that came up from this, and it was a lesson learned for us, and I'm just mentioning it as a tidbit of information, is the fact that in many situations, if you try to identify one visitor for a child, we've seen where, not to give a specific situation, but you may have the biological mother, you may have the biological father, you may have a foster parent who really has guardianship. Then you have the mother and father who don't get along with each other, and now they're fighting in your lobby as to who's to come up, but now you have to tell them that it's the foster parent who really has the legal right. That was not really cool to deal with. So luckily I didn't have to deal with that one too much, and I got to see from the periphery what was going on. But that's something I never thought about going into a situation like this. But that was one of the little things that had to be adjusted. And again, I think we were out in the forefront because a lot of times the other hospitals, it's kind of a funny little analogy, but if you think about the different hospitals in town, I think they're all like little meerkats. Remember Meerkat Manor? Where everybody was like popping their head up and they're like, what's the other hospital doing? What are they doing? And we were doing it too. But everybody wanted to stay on that same level because we didn't want to have to do this type of PPE at Children's. And then when staff moved over to Nebraska Med, they did a different type of PPE and procedure. And then when they moved over here, it was something else. Because we have employees that move different places, especially between Nebraska Med and Children's, but also some may work Children's and Bergen. So our CMOs were often on the line talking with each other and passing around information. So, and we did the same thing with education too. I spoke with the OHPE office here. I spoke with the VP of education. We often talked with each other and say, hey, what are you doing? Well, what are you doing? And we'd pass ideas, we'd share information. We weren't competitors. That's one of those ideas of interprofessional teamwork. We're inter-organizational teamwork, I guess would probably be the better term there. So in the beginning, the incident command happened 3 times a day. I can tell you the first 3 weeks I was on there, I worked 3 weeks straight. 3 meetings a day. We would meet on Saturdays and Sundays also. And basically a lot of information, things that we never encountered before. And that was across the board. The schools we dealt with were encountering new things. The hospitals we worked with were dealing with new things. We were trying to find a new path. A global pandemic was something new to all of us. You all know that. So then we started sending our workers home. Situation like that, you don't know if you're going to see your workers again. You know, they're going to go home. Are they going to come back? Or are they going to quit? Is this illness that bad where something might happen to them? I have one worker who's 67 years old at the time this broke out. She's like, I don't want to go back to work. She says, according to CDC, I'm in a prime demographic right now. So you have to deal with that type of situation. She left in March. I've seen her once since then, and we made sure the place was cleared out and she felt comfortable coming back to do what she had to do. Because again, as a leader, I want to make sure she's comfortable. If she doesn't have to be there, we're not going to have her there. Same thing, I have a couple employees who have small children. They were worried about the situation, especially in the beginning when we didn't know as much as we know now. Also, the schools were starting to go back, sending students home, kids home. Let's see. Again, I talked about similar work processes to other institutions in town. We went to universal masking and eye protection. I think, again, we were fairly early on with that. And you probably know that we can wear cloth masks in a non-clinical situation, but you have to wear the ear loop surgical masks when you're in a clinical situation. I think that's standardized. But again, that was due to communications across the board and also what was coming in from CDC at the same time. People were talking about those things. But in my case, it was my job to get that information out to the deans and directors at the schools. And we developed a scorecard system. And that's how we started sending that out on a daily basis as much as possible. And we kept including as much information as people wanted. So I'll talk about more of that in a minute. Staying on top of current situations. With that, I can also tell you in our incident command, we brought in a TV. We needed to know what Douglas County was doing. We needed to know what the city of Omaha was doing. We needed to know what the governor was doing. So as part of situational awareness, situation monitoring, is that we needed to know when those news briefings were happening, especially in the beginning, because when the governor started reducing group sizes, we had to do the exact same thing. Our conference rooms aren't the same as what they were. We were talking earlier, Nancy and I, about your classrooms here and the way you do classes. And Renee, we were talking about that too. You know, you're zooming to another classroom. We had to do the same thing with teaching over there and also with our clinical conference rooms, things like that. I would say if we had to learn one thing from all that, I think, again, I can't sing enough praises for Children's. I know I'm biased on this, but we heard complaints that we're actually communicating too much. I never thought I would say those words, but we proved it was possible. Because if you think about it, all those people that were on incident command were all trying to take care of the people that they were responsible for to the best of their abilities. God love them. They were doing exactly what they should have been doing. But again, we would send out a message from my group. Maybe med staff would send out another message. Maybe security would send out another message. And if they weren't exactly the same, it would confuse the employees. Also, if you talk about sheer volume across the board, people were getting so many messages, to which marketing was ramped up even more to the point where any communications had to go through them to, one, make sure it was standardized, and then two, to cut down on the overall volume, to which they ended up making us a web page on our intranet. And basically it had all the COVID updates at that point. So people could look at that unless something was really emergent that had to get out, and then that would be a special bulletin that would go out. Even this daily scorecard that I was sending out to the schools, for a while there, had to go through marketing to make sure I didn't say anything that was against Children's policies or procedures. So that would be a couple-hour process to get that approved. Eventually they're like, are you gonna say anything stupid? I'm like, They're like, okay, you can just send your stuff then. We don't want to see your stuff anymore. Like, golden. So then that was a huge bonus for me. I didn't have to wait 3 or 4 hours to get the scorecard approved to send out to all the deans and directors. All right, so again, I'm just showing you that I know how to use smart art and shapes, but this was kind of how it all broke down. Is if you look at the center, you got the gears in the middle, and I would say the CDC state, so basically federal, state, and local. Do you guys think that they always agreed with each other? I'm definitely getting no's from the audience here. I'm betting the chat would say the same thing, but true. They didn't always come up with the same guidance, the same inputs, the same leadership. So we had to weigh that out. But if you look at the different factors, and I kind of touched on some of these already, you got Children's up there in the upper right. We had the other healthcare facilities I already touched on, especially our main key partners like CHI, Nebraska Medicine, UNMC, Methodist, who we share a catwalk with. So our PICU South and our NICU are actually in their towers. So we had to coordinate between the two and make sure that we stayed in the same same realm, I probably want to say, but they end up locking their door between our tower and their tower, the catwalk, and we had to post people there to do like a security checkpoint for a while. And then also we had to coordinate the idea of visitors. You know, what are you doing? What are we doing? Are they going to be able to come through the parking garage at Methodist and get over into Children's? Thousands of logistical pieces there that were just crazy and often got dealt with at the incident command level. So that's the other facilities. Coming down here to the bottom, we had the affiliated schools. Like I said, that's my bread and butter. I love dealing with them, 84 on a regular basis on average. The vendors, people still want to sell their stuff. We still had to get vendors in and out the door. But how do you do that safely? You know, again, in the very beginning, the situation was much different than where we are today. But who do you let in? What has to be sanitized? So all those things had to be worked out through supply chain. Again, back on the earlier slide, I mentioned that I was grouped into the logistics piece. I didn't fully explain that. But logistics, the way they defined it at Children's is, that's your people and things. So logistics was your supply chain, you had HR, and you had education. Again, because we had the bodies. So that's the way they at least saw it. You know, I could have probably argued to get over onto the med side, because especially having the residents and the fellows, but it worked. I was happy to be there. I was happy to be seeing what was going on and hearing what was going on and being able to pass the messages appropriately. But again, vendors, that was another thing we had to worry about. The public schools, that became an issue that got transferred over to me, and I included in on our scorecard each day. But we started hearing from our employees, they were getting concerned. Now the schools were starting to shut down one by one after another. So I had to track all the local schools and where they stood. Bennington, OPS, Millard, you know, you name it. I had about 20 of them on there at one point. So we had to track who was down, who was going remote, when would they be back, things like that. So that became a huge concern for our employees and our staff. You know, now am I the daycare for my child and I still have to go to work and take care of patients who we might think are going to be ramping up here pretty soon. So again, in the beginning, a lot of unknown pieces to hit all. Oh, the media. The media hasn't always been fair to Children's. About a year or two ago, we took some massive hits. But again, when we were typically the first in some cases, not all, but some cases, like the patient visitor thing, that would hit the media right away. So marketing had to be on top of that and make sure it didn't get spun the wrong way. And then also, as soon as things hit the media, we'd frequently start getting the phone calls. Hey, what are you guys doing? Whether it be me in education or our CMO or our CNO, things like that. So again, you know, ripple effect back and forth. So I think now, oh, families, that's about the only one I didn't touch on yet. So the families, of course they're concerned. They want to see what's going to happen with their kids. How do they get them treatment? If they come into the facility, are they going to be exposed to COVID? You know, that's the big question. We also had to build out new negative airflow rooms. Yep, negative airflow rooms, making sure I say the right thing. But we took a portion of our short stay unit, a bunch of rooms there. They had the old windows, which were kind of walled off, so they could punch those out pretty quickly and get a negative airflow system going in. So we were equipped pretty early on. We also set up a quick assessment unit that was in one of our parking garages where people could come in like a racetrack, so that if one of our CP clinics would identify a patient who was questionable, but needed somebody, a provider, to put eyes on the patient. If they didn't want to bring them into the CP clinic, which a lot of them were closed, they would send them to this rapid assessment area, to which a mid-level or an APP would be able to see the patient, maybe even do a swab if needed. And if truly needed, they'd be directed across the street for kind of an immediate admission, or directly to our emergency department would probably be the better way to put that. Okay, so lots of changes, lots of things happen there, lots of communications, lots of leadership. Again, I can't say enough about our senior leadership, our VPs across the board, from ancillary services to our COO, who's also our CNO, our interim CEO, our CMO, and every other C you can imagine. So they did a wonderful job. They tried to make sure everybody was taken care of. So a lot of these things I think I touched on already. We talked about the schools. In many cases, we did not shut down to education except in our CP clinics, but we saw in the beginning when things were very uncertain, the med schools and the nursing schools typically pulled back their students until they assessed what was going on. And sometimes that was based on guidance from the accrediting facilities. Like I can tell you LCME and ACGME at the med school basically said, pull back everybody. We were kind of hearing similar messages from the nursing programs. On a given day, I don't know if I put it up here. Yeah, I did put it up here. Is if you took all the students and we had them all report in a given day, because it's very difficult to say how many students we have on campus at any given moment, because nursing students may show up for 2 days a week. RT or even the rehab programs might be there all for an entire week, but maybe they're only there for 2 weeks. Then we have other programs that are there for the entire semester, Monday to Friday. We have others that just come in on the weekend. So it's very hard to say. So anyway, what I'm getting to is that if you said that we had to bring in all of our students who are currently enrolled and could be with us today, prior to COVID, we had a potential of about 168. During COVID, again, if everybody who was enrolled showed up, and not all of them did because many of them went to remote learning even though they're on clinicals with us. We went down to about 53, but in reality, we might have been down to about a dozen, which that doesn't include the residents. So that's a huge difference. We took a massive drop, but we did it smartly. I can tell you the ones that were there, they were screening, they had PPE, and as programs came back, we started to ask the schools to provide, and I have to admit, this was my idea, got it cleared through the bosses. I said, when we start seeing the inflow of students like we had prior to COVID, we're gonna see a huge spike on our supply chain. And if we see a huge spike, I had a fear that our organization would turn off teaching. So I said, why don't we go out to the schools and ask if they can supply masks and goggles? To which I can tell you, all the deans and directors were very accommodating. They were very willing to do that. They knew it was a small price to pay to keep their staff safe, keep our patients safe, keep our staff safe. And also, we didn't get the negative attention on the supply chain. Right now, I can tell you things on the supply chain are starting to spike up again because there's fears of flu coming around. On a given year, masks and gowns become a little bit scarce or a little less ample. Probably the better way to put it. When flu season hits, but we're also worried now about a second spike in COVID and the flu hitting at the same time, to which I'm seeing the head nod, so I know you're aware of that too. But now we're getting worried about gowns and masks again, to which as long as the schools keep supplying, I think we're gonna be okay. But nothing is certain nowadays, so we'll just kind of keep that in mind. I think I covered all of that. So as we start going into the enduring part, kind of sustaining the status quo or what's the new normal nowadays, we did away with the daily communications because I found that if you keep telling people the same information day after day after day, it's no longer relevant. So we stopped that. Now it's only communications out to the schools based on a major shift, a major change, or difference in process. So that was a switch in the communications. And I can tell you, whether it's from my military days, if we stayed at a heightened level of security awareness for too long, people just became complacent. We're seeing that exact same thing right now across the board. And even they're talking about it with the mayor's briefings and things like that that are going on. People are becoming complacent to the PPE. I just saw on my phone that the city council did enact the masking out through November. So great, I'm happy to see that. And basically though, we have to keep reminding people. We do see it, and trust me, I get the phone calls if a student is seen without their mask or if too many students are close together, and then we correct the issue. We try to make sure, thank goodness it's not usually a repeat issue, but we also see too with different students cycling through, you get a new group, a new fresh crop, they may not be completely familiar. The Children's has the policy, you have to have a mask from car to car, which may or may not be the same with all the organizations. And then also we still want people to walk apart. Now, our nursing students love how they love to be a team and they exchange ideas walking back and forth to clinic, but that's where we try to remind them to stay apart when you're walking. Because also, the funny part is with our nursing students is that everybody has a unique set of scrubs that the nursing students wear. So they honestly become one of the quickest targets for other people throughout the organization. The Clarkson students are the gray with their white lettering. So I'll get a phone call, hey, Clarkson students did this, or red for Nebraska, hey, Nebraska students did this. People are quick to get on the phone. If they're doing it for precautionary reasons, great. If they're doing it to tattle on somebody, I'm not real happy with that. But anyway, we still take action on it. We still take it seriously. And we do correct things as it happens. And things are going to happen. Again, the longer we stay in this, the more complacent people are going to become across the board. We talked about this briefly earlier. Our organizational development started offering resources for people working remotely. They already have a session out there for managers who aren't familiar with working with teams that are remote. And probably by this week, they should have put out the one for employees working remotely. And I'd probably say, we were speaking before the session tonight, is one of the biggest things is that people don't know how to separate the work-life balance. And the idea there, I caught myself many times, too easy to jump back on the computer to address issues. I needed a cutoff time and to put the phone down and get away from it, because I would just keep jumping on the computer and answering emails up until 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and then all through the weekend. So that's probably the lesson I learned from that one. How about going forward? Well, I don't think we completely know yet where we're at or where we're going. Some of the clinical pieces that we stood up are now standing down. I believe it was last week's incident command. We did not have any COVID patients in hospital at that time. That's a good thing. Very happy to hear that. But still, we remained at the heightened security. We want to make sure nobody's passing around. Knock on wood, we haven't had anything major so far. I do not want anything major, either clinical or educational. I'd also say too, is that we have to watch the group and organizational morale. People are separated. They are kind of herd animals in a way, for lack of a better term. I don't mean that in a bad way, but I'm one of them. I'm saying that about myself, is that we like the interaction with each other, being able to talk to each other, things like that. People are getting depressed. They see the negative news all the time. We're going into political season on top of COVID. And if I see one more negative political ad from either party, I'm about to go bonkers. So again, we need to watch out for the morale of our students and our staff. And leadership just needs to adapt with it as we go along. So kind of concluding today, we talked about the 3 main areas of some of the personal experiences and things I found worked for me. We talked about the overview of TeamSTEPPS. We also looked at leading teams within Master Trainer course. And also we did some of the immediate, enduring, and future responses. And the one joke we have at Children's is the only constant is change, because things are always changing over there. Then just adding COVID on top of it makes it about 10-fold on top. So finishing up, and before we go to questions, I want to throw out one ask of all of you, is that from today's presentation, again, I can't stress enough, this is not the fast, rapid pace I usually use. There's usually a lot more interaction and a lot more group dynamics. But from all the things I offered today, I challenge everybody who's either here today, on the chat, or reviews this session later on a recording, just take one thing away from here. Something that works for you. Take any one of those tidbits and improve something. If we all do that, that's a massive change. All right, so that's kind of like the homework for everybody who's here, please. I kindly ask that. But really, a lot of times we go away from presentations, everybody's like, oh, that's great, that's a good thing. But if you can take it as an action item to do one thing, whether it's for you personally or for your organization, I don't care what it is, but make one positive change, please. I just kindly ask that. So I think, if I remember, if anybody has any questions, we'll get set up for those, but I definitely thank you for your time. I learned a few things today, and I appreciate that. I appreciate you allowing me to share. And again, I'm not God's gift to leadership. I want to stress that. I just have a couple years and a couple miles on my tires, and I hope I can present a couple examples that are useful to all of you. There's my contact information if anybody has any questions. Again, the TeamSTEPPS resources are all available out there. Just super easy. Google TeamSTEPPS 2.0. That's where we're at right now. You've got the online guide. You've got the instructor resources. You've got the actual courses. You got the tools. Pick out what you want. Use any of those as your action item. That would be wonderful. And I'm always available. I want to help please follow up with me if you have any questions or comments. How about any questions today? I ran just a little bit long for my plan. I apologize, but Nancy, anything on chats? Oh, looks like she's just gearing up.
So I don't see a question at this time. People may still be writing in the chat, but one person commented that they would really like to improve the organizational knowledge that they have.
Okay.
So gaining experience in the healthcare industry. So this person is saying that, you know, without knowing all the history of the organization and how things go, how that can be difficult to know, you know, what your starting points are and what your ending points are and what the process is.
Okay. So in that case, is that meaning that the person is hoping to get more like a mentor? Is that the way you're taking that statement? Or I'm just trying to make sure I'm tracking along the same lines. As far as learning more about the organization, a lot of that is going to depend on which organization you go to. Like I said, we have a great organizational development section who also does a new employee orientation, which is phenomenal. I know Nebraska Medicine does a good one, but each organization is going to be a little bit different. So in those cases, I highly recommend that somebody either get a coach or a mentor from the organization. Again, mentor can be somebody who's within the same profession. So if it's a nurse, maybe a senior nurse. If it's somebody who's just looking for a coach on how the organization works, then it could be a nurse, and it could be a senior phlebotomist or a junior physician or whoever's willing to work with that person. So in a lot of cases there, I completely agree that learning more about the organization is only going to make you better and help you serve your patients better too. One point I didn't mention before we go is that even if you're in a support function, that your primary focus should always come back to patient safety, quality of care. I tell that to my teams, even though we're education and we're in a support function, if we're doing paperwork so that a clinician doesn't have to do it for onboarding a student, so that they can concentrate on their patient, in an indirect way, we're helping contribute to patient safety, quality of care. So that's the way we need to look at things. I don't care if you're EVS, facilities, security, education, HR. If I can keep something off the back of a clinician, and I tell that to our service chiefs and things like that, I say, if you're getting questions from schools, direct them to me. I said, I should be the one handling that and handling the administrivia piece of things so that you can concentrate on your patients and on your teams. I'm not trying to block them out or try to keep them away from any information in this case. I said, I'll come back and brief you later with what I find out. So anyway, I hope I answered that question, or hope I provided additional guidance there. But the mentors and coaches would be great for organizational information.
We've had a couple comments specifically about that. That
Okay.
mentoring would be great for that. The one person was saying that thank you for the presentation, for the time and the lessons, that it's been great, and she would like to applaud.
Thank you. Thank you. Very nice.
Another person said they only have remote offers right now, which is something that they don't want to be doing at a starting point in healthcare. So they're hoping to have like a position opening sooner where they can be in person and have that experience with working with people.
Yes.
And seeing people rather than doing
Yes.
things entirely remotely.
Completely agree. And with the census numbers being so low in the hospitals, they're coming back up now. But again, we were talking before the presentation today that we had 2 floors in our hospital went down to, I know at one point it was 7 patients for 48 rooms. And actually, I think at points we might have went down even closer to 2. Again, for 48 rooms across 2 floors. And I know the other hospitals hit lows also across the board. So we saw a lot of people being turned back from getting hours, face-to-face jobs. So if it's a job-related thing, yes, I get it, and I totally feel for you. But again, try to keep up on those remote things. Keep your foot in the door, keep your name known, and keep interacting as much as humanly possible would be my suggestion there. Any other questions or comments from our friends on Zoom?
Comments, thanks for a great presentation.
Thank you.
Awesome presentation. Building leadership development at Clarkson would be so great. Thank you. And thank you for the helpful information. That's everything that's come through the chat.
All right. If any group wants me to come back at a later time and do something more personalized, a smaller group, I can tell you my specialization is probably a group of 20, 25. Maybe we'd spread out in this room and do like group interactions. I love that. I think those are very positive, and we get good results. But again, thank you to everybody. Oops, do we have a question here? But again, thank you, everybody. Oh, looks like Renee's coming up.
I want to thank you for coming, and we just got you some Clarkson swag.
Aw, I love swag.
And there's a gift card in there
Oh,
for
well,
you
thank
as
you.
well.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank
I
you for
appreciate
coming.
you. I'd shake your hand or
Yeah.
hug or whatever, but yeah, there we
A
go.
little bump.
Sorry, I don't know what to do nowadays. All
And
right.
Thank you so much for coming and taking your time with
Thank
us.
you.
And all of our organizations appreciate it. And yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you.